We had a pretty full week. It's funny because I've been wrestling a little bit with my green screen. Actually, now it looks okay. And what I've realized is that I think the problem I'm running into is my hair. So before we get started, very important community announcement here. I'm going to take my hat off on stream, which I've never ever done before. So the six dozen, half dozen, 6 dozen, same thing of you are going to witness this. Now look. Now, see, it does this like little animated, like sparkly thing around my hair. That's what I was trying to get rid of, and I don't know how. So maybe it's just wide brim life from here on in. That's it. Because I don't want these like dancing sparkles around my head. That's what y'all came for here for. This week, UK comedy slash do-gooder fundraising team Comic Relief announced that they, in partnership with Wizards of the Coast, were running a D&D one-shot. Some stand-up folks, as I say, to help benefit companies and organizations that were severely impacted by COVID-19. Of course, who hasn't been, but it was a nice gesture for the UK-based group to try to put something together and leverage the D&D format and, of course, the rising popularity of Dungeons and Dragons to run this one shot. And it was a great little kind of run through. It was enjoyable. They wound up raising over £28,000, which is double Canada money. So over 50 grand actually they were raised for in our currency, or what would be in our currency, for local businesses who were really struggling under some of these economic impacts of COVID-19. So it's a nice gesture. It's always fun to see people leveraging the hobby that we enjoy and share to try and do good in the world, and this was a good part of it. They're a registered charity or nonprofit in the UK, and they specialize in entertainment-based relief fundraisers. They do things like stand-up comedy shows. They do things like, of course, this now. New Dungeons and Dragons show. It was just a one-time thing, and they have two hallmark events one called Red Nose Day and the other called Sport Relief that they leverage to kind of help manifest these and do good things in the world. So it was pretty cool. The one shot featured a GM or DM Paul Foxcroft, who was fairly well equipped for the job because he also runs a live Dungeons and Dragons show called Questing Time, and it's a live D&D comedy show as well. So check out Paul Foxcroft. You can check out Comic Relief as well. They held the fundraiser via Tiltify. And before the one-shot was run, players were welcomed to participate in polls that determined what kind of weird, kind of quirky things happened to the characters through the course of the event. The players who were involved in Comic Relief's Dungeons & Dragons one-shot in partnership with Wizards of the Coast were Sue Perkins, who is the host of a UK baking show called The Great British Baking Show. Funny lady as well. And she's actually also signed up to helm her own Netflix show, which is previously untitled at the moment. Nish Kumar, who is also a BBC host and a local, or let's say small UK legend, I suppose. He has experienced some polarizing comedy engagements over the last 6 months, but it looked like they were having a really good time on stream yesterday, so maybe a nice shift for Nish and friends. The third player in the mix was a gent named Ed Gamble, who actually, before COVID-19, had a huge roster of stand-up engagements plotted for all over the UK and globally. So some really good talent in there, and he has his own Amazon Prime video feature called Blood Sugar, if you want to check out Ed Gamble as well. And finally, rounding out the player teams was Sarah Pascoe. Sarah's a staple of UK stand-up comedy and improv comedy over there, and our friends across the pond, having worked with people like Simon Pegg, Nick Frost. And if you Google Sarah Pascoe, you will just see hours and hours of YouTube and live footage from her various stand-up routines and things like that. So very easy to find these folks. Of course, the one-shot is complete. You can always watch the VOD on the Twitch, the D&D Twitch channel. And if you want to get the details on that, check out my article at shambazelgames.com, which covered it as well. Personally, I take a great amount of excitement from seeing folks get into the hobby of Dungeons and Dragons, particularly using it for a good cause. But we've seen this kind of thing before, right? So we've seen charity streams in D&D We've seen a lot of great improv and a lot of great comedic actors or performers playing Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not something that's terribly new in and of itself. They drew a pretty good following. When I was watching, it was around 4,500 to 5,000 viewers, which is not something to, scoff at. I would love to have that many viewers. But when you compare it with some of the bigwig and like the large sort of iconic players, it's probably not in the highest range of things. But then again, oftentimes we find that those who are of notoriety in the UK, they might not be as well known over here in the Western world, let's say, or in the North American continent, particularly in the US. Canada has always had some really great ties with the UK, and I think we share a style of humor and story that creates some unity there. But let's say the celebrity culture in the UK and the celebrity culture in the US is not always the same, right? So it takes them a little bit more time to generate audiences to break in. But they had a really good, respectable following, great viewership, and they crushed their goal, which was, I think, £27,000, and are doing some really great things to help the local community there too. So it's always fun. I was a little bit worried that when you get comedians around the table to play Dungeons and Dragons, that there's a one-up culture that tends to happen. Bless their little hearts. But it can be tiring, let's be honest. If comedians are always kind of trying to force the funny or be funny for the sake of being funny because, hey, I'm a comedian, people expect this from me, then it can get a little bit exhausting, right? Because then that starts to become more important than the game they're there to play. But from what I saw last night, it looked like it was actually a really fun campaign. There was not much of that I saw. It was very low personal competition and very much party oriented. So it looked like a good little trip for them, and I'm glad that they did well with it. And it's nice to see that Wizards of the Coast is sharing the limelight to people like that who want to do these types of things and both promote the hobby as well as do something great to impact their local communities. Good on you, Comic Relief, and fantastic job from Paul, Sue, Nish, and Sarah, and Ed in bringing all of this to life. As a lot of you know, this week, the Dungeon Masters Guild, the online digital marketplace for third-party creations and publishers in the Dungeons & Dragons scope, announced the Play It Forward event, which is a 2-week event wherein DMsGuild will actually forego their typical 50-50 split with creators and forward all the funds and proceeds from purchases made on DMsGuild until May 17th directly to the creators. This is really incredible. It's a rare opportunity. Creators work really hard. There are so many fantastic third-party independent creators in the D&D circuit and the TTRPG publishing circuit in general. It's nice that DMsGuild is going to take this moment to forward all the proceeds to them, because typically, look, the reality is you own a distribution platform like an Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, Walmart, whatever it is. The house has to take a cut, right? The house has to take some, or the platform has to take some of those sales to keep the lights on, to produce the platform, to maintain it, to onboard new vendors, things like that. But I've never seen any of them do anything like what DMsGuild is doing for third-party creators in these next 2 weeks. So I definitely encourage you, if you've ever been on the fence about trying DMsGuild or buying a third-party piece of content, this is the week to do it. A lot of them are between $1 and $3 a piece. And you think about the hours and hours and hours of work that go into some of these. I think it's really worthwhile to get on there and show some love to creators and do the right thing and get them the support that they need, especially now, to keep fueling our adventures and fantasies with great new content outside of some of the official things that are available. So I didn't really have any specific endorsements around that particularly. Just go check it out, because I spent a lot of time on DMsGuild. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, where I did a feature this week. Actually, I gave myself a $50 budget. I went on DMsGuild and I just checked things out, and I went to honestly see how much damage I could do with $50 US. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that too. It was an easy one for me because I don't publish or create content for DMsGuild yet. It's something that I've been thinking about in the future, so we'll see where that future takes me in that regard. But right now I have enough on my plate, so there's nothing really in it for me beyond that, just wanting to really showcase some of these great creators. But between DMsGuild, their partners, and the creators, like I said, I think it's nice for them to forward the full take for this content rather than their 50-50 split, which I believe is what they usually have on the platform. That said, if you are a creator too, a writer, an author, and there are things that you would like to produce on DM's Guild, it's not that hard to get into, and just know that that's it, right? So whatever you price your stuff at, you're going to get 50. The platform's going to get 50, and that turns it into a volume game depending on where you are in your career. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more specifics towards the end of the show about what my experience was on DM's Guild, the budget that I took, what I was able to get, and the types of things that influenced my buying decision when I was deciding who to support and who to purchase from and what to purchase and how. This week on Wednesday, we launched the DM's Guild Showcase. This is the DM's Guild feature showcase, continuing on with the theme of supporting our third-party content creators. DM's Guild Showcase is a bi-weekly streamed Dungeons & Dragons campaign on Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, Twitter, whatever your streaming platform of choice is. It features two things that I love. One, third-party creators. So we take a module, we play it through, and that brings me to the second thing I love, which is our amazing community. So I was able to welcome some incredible community members to the table, the virtual table, of course, who've joined us. Those are Dads and Dragons, at Chickenly Nerd, at Pleasant Doom, and at Just Drawn Radio. So check them out on the Twitters. Wonderful players. We had a great time in our first inaugural session. Started Wednesday, and the next session is Wednesday, May 20th, and it will be every second Wednesday thereafter. This is the advent of something that I kicked off a couple of months ago, where I petitioned the community to let me know if they were interested in participating in a test community D&D group. As you know probably by now, unless you're just meeting me, in which case, hello. I produce a lot of D&D content daily, a lot of feature content, and I had always kind of looked at what's the best thing that I can now offer this community. I think I've got a good base set. I'm comfortable with where I am on content production and my social media presence. Now I want to really produce something that is of value to this community, and the first thing that came to my mind was games. We all love Dungeons and Dragons. We love to talk about it. We love to build and interact with content that speaks to the hobby that we love. But resoundingly and most frequently, what I hear from the community that they want more of is opportunities to play. So this really was the advent of that. But with so many great and amazing actual plays out there in the market, so many great podcasts and streams, I wanted to do something that was a little different. So that's where the concept of DM's Guild, a feature showcase, came from. I wanted to take my desire to bring great community members to the table and play D&D with them, together with an opportunity to showcase some of the great 3P community creators that we have. So I basically went through the same process, and I petitioned the creators and said, hey, if you've got something like this, and I was specifically seeking adventure modules, campaigns, things that I could adapt and run a game around, to let me know. And I had a lot of really great submissions, and they still come in today. Ultimately, we picked this great little 3-part micro campaign by Jeff Stevens and JVC Perry called Scourge of the Nightingale, which follows the legacy of a past that haunts the Hillsfar regions. I can't get too far in detail, especially with two of my players in the chat right now. Thanks for showing up, gang. So we've got to try and keep it, low key. Bringing the publishers and the players together was, I think, the right striking point for this. So, thusly, DM's Guild Feature Showcase was born. Now, the idea of keeping it bi-weekly is for me to fill that other off week with a different type of community gaming, and I'm looking at that being like an intro to D&D for relatively newer players, and also people who are let's say maybe need an introduction to Roll20, things like that. So do tune in every Wednesday or second Wednesday after May 20th to check out that campaign as it evolves. We do have a really great group of players, in my clearly biased opinion, but we're off to a great start. And you, of course, can check out the video edit of that on either YouTube, Twitch, Mixer, or your platform of choice. So hope to see you soon. In other news this week around Dungeons & Dragons, DnDBeyond got virtual dice. They're bringing the virtual dice game. It was only made available to alpha and subscribers, so they're very early stages with this, but we saw some visual elements and creative around the dice that they're producing. Now, that in and of itself was pretty cool news, but it really piqued my interest as DnDBeyond continues to make more aggressive moves that clearly shout that they are making their way into virtual tabletop territory like Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, Astral, and Tabletop Simulator. So I kind of just loosely, jokingly made the call that my bet is that D&D Beyond will be into a proprietary virtual tabletop inside of 12 to 18 months. On further investigation, some of our great Twitter community members had called out that they had actually, shortly after, actually I think about 13 hours after that, D&D Beyond confirmed in another thread that they have always had virtual tabletop and a closed system virtual setting on their long-term roadmap. So invariably, now confirmed, aside from just bringing digital dice to D&D Beyond, that D&D Beyond is now moving aggressively towards building a virtual tabletop setting. Personally, I find that pretty exciting. I would love to give that a shot. I think in the past, Wizards had tried to build like a virtualization or a digitization of the Dungeons and Dragons experience. I don't quite remember what it was called, but I thought it was also called D&D Next, which we know was the working title for D&D 5e when it was in concept. It seemed like they had some real trouble making it work. I don't know if they had the right skill set or the right resources in-house to really own and get that off the ground. But now with D&D Beyond, which started as a founding opportunity between the licensor of Dungeons and Dragons and Curse LLC, they've now they've started to do a lot more of this, bringing partners in with the right equipment to achieve these types of goals. And I believe that's why D&D Beyond is experiencing a much better uptake than Wizards' previous attempts at digitizing Dungeons and Dragons had. Of course, we have a lot of other avenues that are available to promote and do great things for these types of properties, like endorsements on Critical Role, various other content creators who are reviewing and producing things. They've also built presence around D&D Beyond itself, which they hadn't done previously. So that's Todd, I'm probably butchering this, but Kepranek, and of course the D&D Beyond team, who are kind of building their own social business around D&D Beyond, which is the right way to do it. So they're producing tons of content. They've got their own streaming actual play. They're basically checking off all the right boxes that D&D social and digital media consumers want to receive from businesses like this. So I think all of that contributes to the great uptake of D&D Beyond in this generation of it. So we'll dial all that back. I wanted to go a little bit deeper on who D&D Beyond actually is, because there's a common misconception that D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast are the same, and they're not. They're actually completely different entities, but there's obviously a very tight partnership there. This tends to be the sticking point around conversations like, well, if I buy a hardcover book, why don't I get a D&D Beyond version? Or if I get a digital version, then I should get a coupon here. Or if I buy a book, then I should have a coupon code for a digital version. And there are lots of arguments on both sides of that debate with lots of validity. But the reality is, at the end of it, they're not the same company. So it's similar to saying, like, if I buy Spider-Man for PlayStation, then I should also get Spider-Man for Xbox, even though Microsoft and PlayStation don't share funds that way, right? So it's akin to that. Curse, if you've ever played World of Warcraft or really any kind of MMO through the early 2000s to the present, you might recognize that Curse was a huge third-party app database that created mods for these types of games, and they had all kinds of other things too. So Curse, that is the Curse Gaming LLC, that was the founder of D&D Beyond. In fact, Twitch itself used to be a Curse property also. So Curse had built this empire around millions and millions of MMO, massively multiplayer online role-playing game players, in this huge database of mods for those respective games, and over time just accumulated clearly enough funds to bring Twitch TV into being, which was formerly Justin TV. I'm super dating myself now, but if you remember it, that used to be a thing called Justin TV. So they all kind of started to buy up and build these properties together before Amazon bought Twitch. Curse dissolved. The other partner at play in D&D Beyond is actually fandom.com. And if you've ever searched anything nerd culture geeky at all, you've probably come across fandom.com. It's a massive content site, very similar to like wikis, let's say, or like Wikipedia. Fandom.com, a huge editorial content conglomerate revolving around anything nerd-based or geek-based. They are actually now the primary partner in D&D Beyond. So that's a little bit of the who's who of D&D Beyond. And then, of course, Dungeons & Dragons is a wholly owned private brand for Hasbro under their branch operations with Wizards of the Coast. So that's kind of the parentage on the D&D side versus the parentage and foundership of D&D Beyond. So very clearly two totally different entities. So let's go ahead and bring that up at the dinner table the next time your mom and dad is arguing as to why or not they don't get a free D&D Beyond compendium to their hard copy player's handbook. Nonetheless, we do see that whole machine now moving towards VTT, and that, in a very long roundabout way, is why I'm excited about the prospect of D&D Beyond bringing a new sole prop virtual tabletop to the environment, because I think we need some competition in that realm, and it would be nice to see if and how it all works together. Based on how they've been doing things, I think they have the chops to do it right. So very much looking forward to that. And huge props to the D&D Beyond team for all the great work that you're doing today. Of course, D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast working together to produce a lot more free content in their ongoing Play From Home campaign. There's a ton of free content available on Dungeons and Dragons, dnd.wizards.com. You can also check out my article on shambazzlegames.com, where I've got a master list that specifically focuses on the D&D game content that's available. So the modules, the campaign resources, things like that. And I try to keep that updated as much as I can. I can't do it as to the minute as Wizards can, because my budget is smaller than Wizards of the Coast's budget. But I do really kind of refine down to, I cut out like the coloring pages and things like that and just focus on the adventure content, if you're so inclined to check that out too. So my big play this week, the favorite thing that I did, my big feature was that I went on DMsGuild with a $50 budget, and I spent it during the Pay It Forward event, which, as I mentioned, runs from May 4th to May 17th. And I wanted to share with the community what I got. First of all, DMsGuild is pretty user-friendly. It's a bit of a different system. It's just like any other kind of digital marketplace. It's very easy to navigate, especially now during Play It Forward. And just to reiterate, Play It Forward is a 2-week event where all the proceeds from purchases made on DMsGuild are being forwarded in totality to the creators that made them. So DMsGuild typically has a 50-50 split structure. 50% of the proceeds go to the creator, and the other 50% are rationed by DMsGuild, the platform, and their partners in production. So it's a great time to get on there and make sure that the people that you love to create these things are getting all of that sweet hard-earned cash. So I wanted to do it during this time, and it was such a great experience that I think I might make this a bi-weekly endeavor. Although, disclaimer, I went in with a $50 Canadian budget, and I did like 2.5, 3 hours worth of shopping, research, reading to fill my cart. I got it to $49.73, and then I realized that I had not converted it to Canadian. So my Canucks in chat will know what that does to your budget at the click of a button. But it wasn't too bad. I went from $49.73 to 69 something Canadian dollars. So I was so enthralled and so excited about what I did. I just what I had in the card. I was like, well, I'm not going to call it anymore. I'm just going to get all this stuff. But word to the wise, make sure you convert first. Select your little currency converter at the bottom right-hand corner of the DMsGuild interface before you start filling that cart, or you will be due for some unpleasant surprises. And that's not what we want. We want good surprises once shopping on the Dungeon Masters Guild marketplace. So that said, with creators getting 100% of their hard-earned cash for these pieces, I went to town on some of these great works that I found. Now I want to call out three. That's 6. One hand, 3 fingers. 3 specific creators and pieces that I found that were amazing, well worth the price tag. But they were a little bit more pricey to the point where it would have decimated my modest $50 budget in one swoop. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of spread the love as much as I can. So Amarune's Almanac is a collection of lore-based compendiums from Stephen Fiddler. and a number of other amazing community contributors. So I definitely recommend you check that out. They've got Emeruna's Almanac. It covers a lot of lore and detailed specifics of regions in the Forgotten Realms setting of Faerun, most of which are not officially covered in any published materials from Wizards of the Coast yet. So there's one for the Underdark. There's one for the Forests of Cormanthor, which I found tremendously invaluable. There is one for the glaciers and the ice regions of the north. There's a lot of really great lore compendiums like that. And what that does for me as a game master is it prevents a lot of hours of scouring the internet and refining what lore I believe to be true when I'm preparing adventures in those regions. Again, it's Emerune's Almanac. Definitely recommended. There's a bundle of the first 4 almanacs, including, like I said, Underdark, Forest of Cormanthor, the Glacier North, the Northern Glacial regions. But when I am producing campaigns in a setting, I like to know as much lore about that setting as I can. So if you're running games in the Forgotten Realms, pick them up. I think in total it's like $28 for all 4, and it's a great way to have a good little library of all things Forgotten Realms if you're so inclined. The second is the Uncaged Anthology series. This is a really tremendous work by a number of collaborators, and basically the Uncaged Anthology features like hundreds of small adventures from levels 1, I think, right up to level 10. Let's see, I think they're up to 4 volumes as well. And they're published. The published name is the Uncaged Authors because they actually curate a lot of really great authors and writers, publishers in the community to contribute to these Uncaged anthologies. They're like $11 or $12 a piece, really cheap, and you get, like I said, hundreds of adventures in each anthology. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Eventually, I will pick up all 4 of these because you can never have enough adventure hooks, ideas, or seeds. So think about that. Uncaged Anthology from the Uncaged Authors on DMsGuild. And the third and final one that really had me intrigued was Call from the Deep by JVC Perry. You might notice this. It's got that beautiful cover of the Illithid, the Mind Flayer, close up on it. It did really well. It continues to do really well. But this is the closest thing I found to a full and complete third-party published campaign resource. So this is on par with like your Tyranny of Dragons, your Princes of the Apocalypse, Storm King Thunders, these great compendiums that are released to take characters from level 1 to sometimes 12 to 17 in a single campaign. A really great piece produced by JVC Perry, of course, a well-known author and producer in the community too. So Call of the Deep by JVC Perry. Check that out. From there, I went ahead and I jumped into DMsGuild with my $50 budget, now in US dollars, and I picked up a number of things. So I wanted to focus specifically on adventures and modules. That was my goal for this. And the reason being, I don't permit third-party rules, adjustments, effects, or mechanics. I trust the rules and the official things produced to the official publications from Wizards. So what that means for me as a customer, what appeals to me on Dungeon Masters Guild are specifically tools that help me do a better job, easier as a game master, and adventures, modules, story plot hooks, and lore that help me craft the worlds that I want to craft. So obviously there's something on there for everything. There are tons of subclass options, new race options, new spells, magic items, all that stuff. But the only hard fast rule I have on my table, or one of the only few hard fast rules I have in my tables, I don't allow just like third-party homebrewed mechanical content. So like no new spells or new things like that, new character attributes, stuff like that, because they're relatively untested. They tend to be relatively untested. And while I'm not necessarily talking about DMsGuild, I'm talking about, like, you know, somebody found like a version of an Artificer on Reddit and they want to run it, and it's like grossly OP, totally untested, and just a ridiculous concept. That said, when I went onto DMsGuild, I picked up the 5e Action Tracker, which is a great little tool. It's almost like a placemat kind of printout. It's great for newer players because what happens when you get around combat with new players, they aren't really sure typically what they can do. And this outlines all that with a little token placement sort of tracker so they can say, okay, these are the things that you can do in a turn. You have movement, you have action, you have bonus action, reaction. Here's how they apply. Here are some states and statuses breakdowns. Just a really great little kind of placemat sized cheat sheet for new players on what they can do when combat comes around. And in my opinion, anything that makes combat more fluid or more logical for your players and your game masters is a win across the table. This thing was like 78 cents or something like that. So I snapped that up quick. Beyond that, I grabbed a whole bunch of adventure modules called A Small Problem, Call of the Shadow Prince, Catalog of Calamity, which is a 4-part module set, Caverns of the Merfolk, Journey into the Realms, Lair of Elicrimalicos, which is a scenario where a tribe of Aarakocra are vying for control over their Mountain Spire home versus a dragon threat, which I'm looking forward to. One called the R.A. Salvatore Presents The Vile Crypt of the Reawakened Sisterhood. This is an adventure module that actually was the advent of a table game hosted by R.A. Salvatore himself. R.A. Salvatore is the author and the proprietor of the Drizzt Do'Urden, the Companions series. So a lot of things that you see written around Drizzt and Catti Brie and Brunar Battlehammer and all of those great heroic icons of the Forgotten Realms came from the brilliant mind of R.A. Salvatore. And this is a set or a series of content pieces written by players at his table that have tested that content in his home game. Kind of a neat little story there. The Grave of the Purple Worm, The Lady of Trollskull Priory, The Wizard's Tower, Temple of the Spider, The Claw of Winter, Winds of Midwinter, The Knife Hall Thieves of Duskin, which was just featured on the DM's Guild Creator Showcase, 100 Bard Songs, which is a fun little compendium that just is a random table of 100 songs, the titles and what the songs are about for bards to kind of bring into roleplay at the table. I thought it was fun. Probably a gift for my wife and her Bard China in our long-running D&D actual play, the Charisma Check podcast. Shameless plug. But it's my show, so I'm going to do that. The Five Temples of the Earth Mother, Part 1, Life and Moon. You have to be able to say it before you can play it. The Leviathan's Tomb, Battle for the Undercity, Temple of the Nightbringers, and Waterdeep City Encounters. The latter, Waterdeep City Encounters, is actually a DM Guild Adept collaboration. DM's Guild Adepts are hand-selected authors who've done particularly well on the platform, who are then engaged by Wizards of the Coast to produce official tertiary content to support their official storylines, like Rise of Tiamat, or as rather Tyranny of Dragons, Curse of Strahd, Tomb of Annihilation, Waterdeep Dragon Heist and the Mad Mage, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, all that good stuff. So yeah, it was a really good time on there. I had a blast going through DM's Guild, really experiencing all the great things that these three third-party creators have to offer. And with $50 US, I picked up 21 items. I'm so excited to dive into them and get familiarized and start to bring them into my home games. So you should definitely take a look out there. Even if you take $5, you're going to get a handful of really great content. Like I said, most of these items landed somewhere between like $1 to $2, $3 a piece. And there are way more creators and way more amazing pieces out there than I could ever have time or budget to grab all of. But like I said, I'm not done with it. I will go back there and I will continue to support these amazing community members who put their blood, sweat, and tears and the hours into creating these great adventures and compendiums for our games at the table. So do check them out. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the buying experience on Dungeon Masters Guild, and what I found as a purchaser, and some of the things that I found influenced my opinion in doing so. So hopefully these are things that might be of benefit to those creators out there or people who are looking to publish. This is just my kind of objective opinion on how I approached DM's Guild and what I was kind of looking for and the things that ultimately got my dollar at the end of the day. Like I said, my personal focus for content on DM's Guild is mainly kept to adventure modules, adventure campaigns, lore items, and tools that make my life as a GM easier. So I did not go into anything that was rules or mechanics based or class based or race based or features or anything like that. Anything that affected the rules of the game and how the game plays, I did not go into. I kept strictly focused on adventure modules, campaigns, settings. The one call out here is I was a little bit disappointed at how much content has been published. That's really just a loose or thin veiled promotion for someone's stream or content. I think that's a little ulterior. So just calling that out right now. And I'm sure that's got to be a sticking point in the publishing community too. There are a couple of pieces that are just really thinly veiled, kind of slapped together content. And the first page and a half is like an advertisement for someone's stream, like actual play or podcast or something like that. That's a little gross. Folks, if you're doing that, you should stop, because I don't think that's effective, and I don't think it does the creator community justice. So just be mindful of that when you are searching for things on DM's Guild. Good content is good content, and there were a lot of really great content pieces that were tested or came about through a stream, and those are wonderful. What I'm talking about are just the very thinly veiled, like clearly no effort went into it, and like the focus of the piece is not the piece, but rather showcasing someone's YouTube channel. So that's the distinction I'm making. That said, as I navigated my way through DMsGuild, there are a few things that I found consistent in the pieces that I ultimately opted to buy. And those include the art, cover, and overall visual representation of the piece. Yes, the visuals do matter. So, like they say, don't judge a book by its cover. But in this case, I did take the visuals and the art and the overall polish and presentation of the content in consideration. And that was kind of like my first check. If I liked that, that immediately caught my eye. I shouldn't say it was my first check. That immediately caught my eye, but it wasn't the most important part in the buying making decision. For me, the most important part was the synopsis, so the description of what the piece was, and the full preview. So on DMsGuild, there's the option of having a small preview or a full large preview. And the full preview gives you a couple of pages to read through that gives you a sense of what that content piece is like. The stronger these full previews were, the more likely they were to end up in my cart. That plus the title, plus the presentation of what the content will do for me, and the cover art or the visual art all work together to kind of create my first step. From there, as I was going through the preview and reading things, format, layout, polish, and grammar and spelling. Oh man, please, DMsGuild 3P publishing community. I know some of you self-publish from start to finish. Some of you have layout editors and proofreaders. There is no excuse for publishing professional work with spelling errors in it. That is the first thing that causes me to question and brings mistrust into how good I can expect that content to be when the summary or the overview or pages and text in the preview have spelling errors, grammatical errors, words that aren't even words. Like you have to be conscious of that if you're publishing for a public medium and asking people for money for it. Even in a pay what you want or a freemium platform, it's your professional integrity. Please like double check, triple check, quadruple check your spelling. I'm not perfect at it, but a lot of my stuff is done for volume and speed. If you're producing professional work, make sure that it is error-free because that will impact my buying decision. If it impacts mine, it's likely to impact someone else's and a majority of people. So grammar, spelling, polish, professionalize it. That's a big part of my buying decision too. In the content itself, I like to see thorough descriptions for locations. So if it is an adventure module or something like that, thorough locations, descriptions, and sidebar descriptions like that I can narrate to the players. A lot of producers did a really great job of that. So they have a description of the location, what it's like. They have a really in-depth, great map guide for encounter scenarios like that. They have great sidebars for you to, that little piece that says read or paraphrase these to your players. Really great kind of blown out descriptive narrative there. What I'm doing with these is I want to take some of the heavy lifting off me as a game master, and that includes writing my own descriptions, which I typically do, and I usually will do anyway. But the more robust, clear, and thorough and descriptive those sidebar narrative panels are, the less I have to retreat it or retool it for my own style. So that's a great quality of life improvement to me that often made the difference between what went in my cart and what stayed on the shelf. To that end, anything that I could see that makes my life easier as a GM, that also got my heart in deciding what to buy. So when you're writing, know your audience, right? We always say in content creation to know your audience. Make sure that when you're writing for the GM, because eventually if it's if it's an adventure piece or a module or a tool for GMs, and that is your audience, right? Think about how does this make a GM's life easier, and how easy is it to integrate with any existing campaign? So if it's system agnostic or at least campaign setting agnostic, you're going to allow a lot more flexibility for GMs to use your content. And then you want to make it as easy as possible. You want to answer the questions they have before they have to ask them. And that's going to make your product a lot stronger too. Clear outlines and multiple story path options in adventure modules were important to me, but not critical. This was a nice to have. So if something is outlined in a campaign or adventure and the players don't go that way, I'm perfectly capable and adept with managing and adjusting the story based on whatever route they choose. But that's not the case for everybody. And I also enjoy having that laid out to me from time to time. So having multiple story options, there were a couple that had a really great like if then scenario. So if you have your main storyline in the way that it's kind of intended to roll out, but then there was like, if the characters do that, then this, or here are some other options that can happen based on your players' decisions. So having those kind of multiple arcs and storylines and branches considered, even if just for the first few steps into those other, let's say, alternate paths, was a big plus and a big benefit to me as a GM and a consumer. Like I said, for tools, the overall quality of life improvement, does this answer a challenge that I have at the table, or is it just content for content's sake? Like the activity tracker, immediately I can attach that utility to a question I always get from my players. So think about the questions that your players are always asking or always struggling with, and then answer that question for DMs when you produce tools to help them at the table. I think that'll make them for a much stronger project too. Keeping things not too setting specific. Granted, we should all be at least a little bit imaginative in our play of Dungeons and Dragons. But if you can avoid making things too specific, like there were a couple of pieces that were great, but they were core Eberron. And if you took them out of Eberron, they didn't make sense. So they speak to like dragon houses and specific cultural events in Eberron and things that were tied to specific mechanics that are Eberron exclusive. That meant that it was either impossible or at least very difficult for me to port that into my campaign, which could be my own world or Forgotten Realms or Ravenloft or something like that. So if you're creating a tool or an adventure module or a campaign that you want to have more broad appeal, try to make it as setting agnostic as possible. It's okay to use something as a baseline, like you can set it in Eberron, but always make sure that there are options for GMs to pull it out of that environment without completely undoing the fabric of the entire piece. And then finally, and I do mean finally, I came down to ratings and price. I know this is tricky, but the reality is in a digital environment where we're making purchases online, ratings and reviews are important. I know that's really tough because it tends to be exclusive for or exclusive to big producers, and really make things an exponentially uphill climb for new producers to the scene because you don't have a big following, you don't have a lot of people purchasing your products, you don't have a lot of ratings. But a lot of cases, 1 or 2 ratings netting a 5-star review, even if it's a couple of friends who can look at it and give you some objective, honest feedback, is helpful. So go out there, do the heavy lifting, curate 10 to 15 reviews from people you know. Give your stuff to content creators. I know I'm not a fan of the work for free, but it really isn't. I mean, advertising costs money. So if you're able to provide your content to a reviewer or a personality or somebody who creates content and does have that following, you're not giving your content away for free. I want to be very clear about that. You're giving your content as a very small, modest cost to you to access those audiences that you don't have. So that's the trade-off, right? It's not the same as asking a band to play for free or get paid in exposure or any of that crap, right? It's not using an artist's license without crediting them. It's not. This is a quid pro quo that could be really beneficial for you. So get your stuff out there, curate some reviews, get some quote snippets, and do the promotion. Typically, my rule for content, and I'll share this with a lot of people ask me about my social grouping, like social marketing. One of the biggest tenets that I take is you should spend at least 3 times the amount of time promoting your content as you spend creating the content. And yes, it's a ton of work. And then, of course, price wasn't really a big thing because, honestly, I will tell you straight up, there was nothing on DMsGuild that I felt was overpriced. Nothing. Not a single thing. I did not see like anything on there that was over the top, out of this world expensive. Like I said, most of the great stuff I grabbed was between $1 and $4 a piece. Easily well worth it. You think about the hours that these creators put into this content, and some of the bigger, more robust things were maybe $30, $33. I tend to compare this to the cost of a video game, which might last me a couple of weeks, and I know damn well that out of all this content, I'm going to get hours and hours and hours and days of content out of it. So that is really a quick inside look on my experience with DMsGuild, the types of things that influenced my buying decision, and overall, it was a really great experience. I encourage you and anyone and everyone to take a minute, go to DMsGuild this week. Play It Forward is on until May 17th, during which your favorite creators will get 100% of your hard-earned cash in return for their hard work on this great content that's going to bring culture, excitement, enjoyment, and hours and hours and hours of entertainment to you and your table. So do it up. And that is a wrap for the Speaking Common news this week. It is Saturday. Again, I have to cheat because quarantine reasons and no one's watching the calendar these days. It is Saturday, May 19th. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Of course, stay tuned for the podcast. And until next time, happy gaming. Be good to one another. We'll see you right here for another Speak in Common next week. See you soon.